Hi, Michelle here, and I'm inviting you to Wake Up and Live. And today I want to talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is something we're told to do all the time, but how often are we actually told how? What does it really mean to forgive something? And what are the steps to it? Today I was at church and I was listening to somebody talk about forgiveness, and I just realized it's a process, but what is the process? And so I asked some questions and I got some intuitive knowledge about the process of it. And one of the very first things you have to do in order to forgive is to acknowledge all of your feelings. What kind of feelings are you actually feeling? So often we don't actually even know what we're feeling. We just know that we don't feel good. So start acknowledging your feelings. And for me, that's not just acknowledging it, it's also feeling it. So I'm like, oh, I'm feeling really angry right now. I feel this anger fully and completely. I embrace this anger and I allow that to process for a minute, and then I notice what else I'm feeling. So almost always if you're feeling angry, you will also be feeling fear or sadness underneath it. Pretty cool. So when you start to acknowledge your feelings and how you actually feel. And this isn't about blaming somebody else, because forgiveness is actually a very inward process. It's about looking at how you actually feel. Are you afraid? Are you jealous? Are you angry? Are you hurt? Are you, I don't know. What are you feeling? That's the first step, in my opinion. The very first step to do is to acknowledge what you're feeling. And then acknowledge your judgment of the situation. Becoming aware of the fact that, if you have something to forgive, this is really truly all about you. This is about your perspective of what's going on. So what are you judging about it? What are you making decisions about it? Judging is not necessarily a bad word. And I grew up thinking judging was the worst word. Judgmental, not so great. Judging, normal. You have to judge. You have to eventually make a decision. Being in the space of just is amazing, but in order to move forward in life, you have to make a decision about it. So you have to make a judgment. But the great thing about it is that you don't have to keep those judgments. You don't have to keep that decision. You don't have to keep your perspective. Being aware that it is a perspective is huge and powerful. So start noticing what rules you've put on it and how the other people have broken your rules. And look at those and see if there's something you can change or adjust. The other idea that's right along with this, and I don't know that one is more important as far as order of priority to the other, is to start also looking at their perspective. What are they seeing and what are they thinking, and were they really intending to hurt you? And even if they were, you can start, having a little compassion on them. Why did they choose that kind of lifestyle? Sometimes if you can get into that space where you're looking at their perspective and looking at your perspective and seeing where you got all those perspectives on, that is really powerful and really a key thing to do. Yay! So then the next thing is to start forgiving yourself. Forgive yourself for feeling the feelings that you felt. Forgive yourself for the judgments that you've made and for your lack of compassion for the other person. Forgive yourself really just means love yourself. Just, give yourself an energetic hug. If you want to, visualize yourself in that person and actually give them a hug. Because really forgiveness is just an act of love. It is an action of love. It's consciously choosing to place love on something. And so start loving yourself. Start really truly loving yourself. Start saying, you know what, it's okay that I did that, and then let it go. And let it go. And forgiveness, it may take time. You may be able to forgive aspects of it, and and other aspects are harder. Sometimes if somebody repetitively hurts you, that can be really hard to forgive. And so it may be that you need to take and look at aspects of it and forgive aspects of it. Choosing gratitude and love. And so that's the other thing, is just choosing gratitude. Being grateful for what it felt like, or grateful for that situation. Being grateful for what you've learned from that situation. Being grateful for that person for showing up that way for you, even if it wasn't a good thing. And here's the other thing about forgiveness. So often we think that forgiveness means that we have to trust them again. That is not the truth. You don't have to trust them again. Forgiving them is about you letting that go. It's about you acknowledging everything's there and then letting it go. A lot of people say forgiving means forgiving it to God. It's like separating for and give. Give it to God. So it's letting it go. Trusting that God has, or the universe, or however you want to look at it, it's going to take care of things. So I'm only responsible for myself, my own responses to things, my own attitude about life. I can only change myself. I can't change them. And if I forgive them, it doesn't change the fact that they still have consequences for their own behavior. So whether you believe in karma, or that God's going to punish them, or whatever your experience is with them, you give that away and you just trust that they are going to have their consequence somehow, some way, that if their heart was not in the right place, they're going to get that response. Obviously, we've talked about trust, and the next idea is that you don't have to allow people back in your lives. Creating healthy boundaries sometimes means that certain people aren't allowed to be a part of your life. That doesn't mean you haven't forgiven them, because forgiveness is about what you hold inside of your heart. It's about giving away the anger and the hurt and the things, and loving yourself and going to a place of love. And a place of love doesn't mean that you have to have them in. You can love unconditionally, but that doesn't mean that you accept them into your lives. So let's look at this from the point of view of God. God loves all children, all his people, unconditionally. He has an unconditional love. But he has put conditions on your behavior. If you do not behave a certain way, you do not get to be with him. You end up going to hell. Or in my religious beliefs, we have different layers of where people can end up. So there is this condition there. And it's the same thing with us. We have this unconditional love. It means that we love somebody no matter what. But it doesn't mean that we have to let people walk all over us. There gets to be conditions. Conditions not about our love. We love them no matter what. We choose unconditional love, but we still have conditions in life. It's, you treat me with respect, you get to be in my life. You don't treat me with respect, you don't get to be in my life. And we get to establish those kind of boundaries. So we have conditional boundaries, unconditional love. And that's when you've gotten to that place, and it's pretty hard. Sometimes we think that we've forgiven. I know that, oh my gosh, I used to think that I had forgiven my dad. My dad molested me when I was a little girl. And I used to think that I had forgiven him. And yet every time I met a guy, the very first thing out of my mouth, not the very first thing obviously, but like as soon as I thought we were going to start maybe having a relationship, I would tell him about my dad. It was like this thing that I just had to let everybody know. This was happening. This happened. This was my past. And I even could sometimes hear the bitterness in my voice as I was saying it, but I didn't always hear the bitterness. And people would tell me, you need to forgive your dad. And I'm like, I have. And they're like, no, you haven't. And it's because we've forgiven layers of it. We've forgiven levels of it, but we haven't fully forgiven everything involved. And a lot of it's also we haven't forgiven ourselves. And so I knew when I had finally forgiven my dad when I stopped telling everybody about it. The guy that I met a few weeks ago, I didn't tell him about him, but he asked, when he asked the question, I was like, well, yeah, I was. Because he asked me if I was abused, and I was like, yeah, I was abused. But I didn't bring it up myself. I didn't talk about it. I speak matter-of-factly about it. It happened. It was an event that happened in my life. It doesn't define who I am today. It gave me a lot of learning fodder, a lot of things that I got to learn from, and the ability to look at all the layers and forgive him and come to a place of love for him. I still have an area that wasn't about the abuse. It was about what happened when he got married, that I still haven't figured out all of the layers. I still haven't addressed all of the hurt and all of the feelings that I've had about that experience when I was a teenager. But as far as the abuse goes when I was little, it just is. My memories, they just are. And my need to punish him, gone. Completely gone. And that's one of the things, that when you get to a place where you have no negative feelings come up for that person at all, that's when you know you've actually forgiven them. You've fully forgiven them, and you've forgiven yourself. And that's what we're going for. Because it's not about them. It's about you. How do you feel about yourself, and how do you feel inside? Are you carrying around a big ball of yucky energy, hurt feelings, and bitterness? If you're carrying those kind of feelings around inside of you, you haven't forgiven it. You have not given it to God or whoever. You haven't let it go. And that's what we need to do. And that's where true joy comes in. When we get to that place that we no longer carry those hurt feelings, and when we look back on our memories, there's no negativity. When we get to that place, that's when our lives are magical. That's when the magic happens in our lives, because that's when we know that we've forgiven. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for coming to my channel. If you like what you see, please be sure to thumbs up, subscribe, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Remember to let your soul shine big, bright, beautiful, and light, and I will see you tomorrow.